Boxing as a backdrop to the stories we love just never gets old. From classic films like On the Waterfront to the Rocky saga, followed by the spin-off Creed franchise, it seems no other sport reflects the inevitable knockdowns of life and the virtue of getting back up again quite like boxing. After all, Rocky was a box office smash, and it certainly wasn't just boxing fans lining up to see it when it was released almost 50 years ago. However, tied up in boxing's cultural appeal is its inherent danger, most particularly of brain injury. A review of multiple contact sports studies found concussion occurs in almost 1 in every 10 rounds in professional boxing, and with each concussion comes increasing likelihood of lasting brain damage. Are the risks of boxing justified by its cultural and sporting value? What does former professional boxer, now economist, Dr. Antonio Graceffo think about the value versus the risks of boxing? And what drives Dr. Barry Jordan to work as a team physician for Boxing U.S.A, despite the sport's danger to the brain? Welcome to Vital Signs, where we look at how to get healthier from all angles, from the biochemical and nutritional to the things we do that nourish our minds and our souls. I'm Brendon Fallon. You can follow us on Instagram at see.vitalsigns and Brendon Fallon on Twitter to get notice of new videos. Dr. Jordan has decades of experience in sports neurology and was recently inducted into the New York State Boxing Hall of Fame. Dr. Jordan, it's a pleasure to have you back on Vital Signs again.
Thank you.
What actually happens in the brain? I think the danger that occurs is connected to concussion. What actually happens in the brain when concussion occurs?
The concussion occurs, there's a sort of electrochemical, mechanical disconnection. There's multiple cascades that are initiated at the time of a concussion, which includes changes in neurotransmitters, changes in ionic gradients, changes in energy function. So it's very complicated. But the primary mechanism, as I mentioned before, is rotational acceleration. It's sort of that spinning of the head that causes the concussion.
Right. So Dr. Jordan, if I understand correctly, it's not so much the impact, but the spinning of the head.
The rotational acceleration is the major culprit.
And what's happening in the brain when that happens?
When that happens, you have stretching of axons, which are the sleeves of the nerves, and these can tear microscopic level and causing chemical changes within the brain.
I also spoke to Dr. Antonio Graceffo, who holds a PhD from the Shanghai University of Sport. In earlier life, he boxed in the US military and professionally in Asia. He has also competed in professional wrestling and mixed martial arts, or MMA, in Asia. Dr. Graceffo, it's a pleasure to have you on Vital Signs.
Good to see you again, Brendon.
Before, I've interviewed you in an international political capacity. I've asked you international relations questions in terms of China. Now, I'm doing a health show, and I'm asking you about boxing because you also have this identity as a fighter. Is there a connection between these two things?
Well, basically, I was a pro fighter, and that got me my scholarship to study in China. And then I used my sports scholarship in China after I graduated. I used that to get admission to the School of Economics. So it's kind of a roundabout path that I arrived at being a China economist, but it was through sport.
Right. So this is interesting. It kind of opened economic doors for you, or provided the economic means to do things that you wanted to do. When I talk about head injury and shots to the head, in your career, is there a particular fight that comes to mind?
So when I look back, I shudder to think of how many thousands upon thousands of times I probably got hit in the head during training during those years. And then when I was fighting, you're trying to win by a knockout. And I had a lot of fights where I got knocked down, and I stood up before the referee counted to 8, or vice versa, where I knocked the guy down and the referee, couldn't get to 10 before the guy stood up. So we keep fighting. So you're still fighting with the concussion. So the worst hit I ever took, though, there are a few fights that I have a vague memory of when I was younger that I remember sitting in the dressing room or in the car after the fight, asking if I had won. So turning to my coach and saying, "Did I win tonight?" So I didn't even know what the outcome of the fight was.
So one minute you're fighting, the next minute you're in the car asking, "Did I win?"
Exactly. Yep. And my clothes are changed or not changed. And I'm sitting in the car and I turn to the coach and say, did I win? Now, what's also scary about that, and funny in a way, sometimes the answer was yes. So So that raises a very important point, because we think of these guys getting, guys who lose fights are getting head trauma and they're getting hit in the head. Guys who win fights are getting head trauma and getting hit in the head.
What do you think about boxing and other heavy contact sports? Does their sporting value justify their dangers? If you're watching on TV, you can find Vital Science at epochtv.com to leave a comment and let us know your thoughts. And if you're finding this video helpful, please be sure to share it with family and friends.
We try to teach the athletes what to recognize or what to look for if they're experiencing a concussion. Sometimes it's very obvious. So, for example, if someone sustains a head trauma and they develop loss of consciousness, that's pretty obvious that they had a concussion. But the majority of sports-related concussions do not involve loss of consciousness. Probably less than 5% of concussions involve loss of consciousness. So it's important to do a detailed evaluation. And I start with simple questions, just like orientation. Where are we today? How'd you get here? Who you playing? What's the name of the team? Who you played last week? There's certain questions like that. And sometimes you'd be surprised at the answers that you receive, because sometimes they may not remember. I had an athlete one time, was actually a boxer, who probably sustained a concussion in the ring and didn't remember anything previous that day except for having breakfast. He had no recollection of how he got to the arena. And then the next thing he realized, he had awakened in the hospital the next day.
Dr. Jordan, in the context of sport, more generally, last time we talked about football, how does the potential for injury compare with boxing to football playing?
There are more neurological injuries in boxing, whereas there's probably more orthopedic injuries in football. But in terms of damage to the brain, I think boxing tends to be more significant. No question about that. And there's other sports out there that people initially never recognized as really being associated with potential brain injury, in particular soccer. So if two people go up to hit the ball, is more the collision of the heads, or the elbow to the head, or the elbow to the head, or the shoulder to the head, that causes the neurological problems. The heading of the ball, I don't think makes that much of a difference unless you don't see the ball coming. It's almost like the same thing in boxing. And in boxing, they say it's the punch you don't see. So in soccer, it's also the ball you don't see. If you don't see the ball coming, so when the ball hits you in the head unexpectedly, you're not able to tighten up your muscles. So that causes the head to move, and that can cause some problems. Again, like in boxing, if a boxer gets hit with a punch, he sees the punch coming, he can at least brace himself.
What is going through your mind when you think back to some of those most intense fights that you've been in? What's going through your mind in the moment?
At the moment?
In the moment.
Nothing. Oh, nothing in the moment. No, you're not thinking about that at all. You're not thinking about any kind of injuries at all. You're just getting through. And one of the things I'll say about cardio, they always say in sports or in fighting, they always say cardio is the best defense, or cardio is your best friend. When you get really tired, when you get so tired, you see the punch coming, and you're so tired that you debate, would I rather let that punch hit me, or would I rather move out of the way? And when your cardio reaches a certain level of just fatigue, you say, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and let him hit me, because that's less pain than moving out of the way. So the fact that you could even think like that in a fight, that you would even have that kind of rational discussion with yourself, whether or not you're going to move out of the way of that punch, right? This should give you an idea of how many of these blows the guys are taking.